Absolutely. And we've already seen a big turnout. Nearly 100 million voters have already gone to the polls early. And I think we can expect to see that really continue through Election Day. And I think you're going to see, and the Trump campaign is very much banking on this, Republicans turning out. If you look at the percentage of Democrats versus Republicans who tend to mail their ballots in, it's definitely Democrats who are more likely to vote by mail, and sometimes Democrats who are more likely to vote early. And you've seen Kamala Harris and Joe Biden really pushing that, especially during the coronavirus pandemic. However, Republicans are expected to very much turn out at the polls. And I think tonight, when you first see the returns come in, it's going to look like Donald Trump has a lead in some of these states like Pennsylvania, for example, because mail-in ballots are only starting to be counted in Pennsylvania today. So once we get more mail-in ballots in, you're going to see that gap narrow.
Yeah. Both candidates are selling very different views of the world. As they worked very late into the night, will those last-minute pitches make any difference?
You know, I think they could in some respects. I've talked to some strategists, especially in Senate and House races last week, and they were talking about their closing advertisements, for example, and, their closing messages in advertisement. And there is a contingent of the voting population that is undecided or maybe doesn't normally pay attention to politics, but they feel pressured to vote in the last week or so of the election. So there is that definite window where candidates can make a difference. And I think talking to those strategists in House and Senate races, that perspective can be shifted absolutely to presidential races.
With the huge turnout, nearly 100 million people voting ahead of today, which is polling day, will that definitely slow down the counting? And is it possible that we're not going to see a result tomorrow?
I think it's very possible we won't see a result tomorrow. Like I said, in Pennsylvania, they haven't started counting their results until today for mail-in ballots. In Alaska, for example, a mostly vote by mail election, they're not going to start counting ballots until a little later this month or, in a couple of weeks. So it's very possible we won't see a result. Now, we could see a lead, and that's been questioned by a lot of political watchers, because we heard President Trump reportedly said or told those close to him over the weekend that if he had an early lead, he would declare victory. Now, he has pushed back on those reports, but says his lawyers are ready to pose any legal challenges. So definitely a lot of anxiety, I think, among Americans and among those in Washington as to whether this will be a contested election, because this could be in the throes for the next couple of weeks going into December.
We're seeing some live pictures out of Charlottesville, Virginia here now as I'm talking to Julia, and there are people, of course, it's only 6 o'clock, just 10 past 6 in the morning. People are already getting in there and casting their ballots. Not far away from Virginia, of course, is the White House, and there is a fence being erected. In some areas, people are boarding up their shops. What is happening?
Well, actually, right outside my apartment, the front entrance has been boarded up, and I don't live far from the White House. You go down the street in Washington, and businesses are being boarded up, and I think a lot of it is for precautionary purposes. Look, earlier this year, during a lot of the protests over racial injustice and police brutality, there were some riots that broke out in a number of cities. And I think there's still some anxiety from those riots, and they want to prevent any damage. So they're thinking ahead this time. At the same time, there's also a lot of tension, I think, on the streets of Washington, D.C., and on the streets of cities across the nation. I mean, look, we are bitterly divided right now. There's been a lot of negative news coverage throughout this election. I mean, there were obviously the intelligence community uncovered a plot for a militia in Michigan and Virginia to kidnap the governors of those states over the coronavirus pandemic. So there is just a lot of tension, a lot of ill will, I think, felt among the electorate right now. And law enforcement is really trying to get ahead of that and really hoping for the best.
And of course, we've seen a number of Supreme Court judgments around those early mail-ins and whether they will be counted, up to what point they'll be counted, different decisions right across various states. Is it possible that if the votes get very close, there'll be further challenges to allow votes to be cast, to be counted?
Absolutely. And I think that's why liberals were so concerned about the appointment of a third conservative judge to the Supreme Court. And there's a lot of questions as to how those, three new conservative judges and the other conservatives on the court will rule if something were to go to the Supreme Court. Now, conservatives and Republicans were dealt a blow in Texas yesterday when a number of ballots side were said to be legitimate and were counted, and they were challenged that it was a drive-through ballot kind of voting kind of situation. So there's already legal challenges being presented in the early voting process, but like President Trump said, he is gearing up his lawyers for legal challenges, and I think we can absolutely expect those after Election Day.
Extraordinary day ahead for you, Julia. Good luck with it, and we'll be watching with intense interest as it all plays out. Thanks for joining us. Good luck.